The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created. The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is Shapes of Love.
Good evening, everyone. It's Created in the Image of God. I'm here with an amazing guest tonight. His name is Michael Gungor. First of all, let me say I'm a tad bit under the weather. You might hear it in my voice. But as they say, the show must go on. We're also having a little bit of technical difficulties, so I'm going to do a little bit longer intro than normal while we sort that out. But rest assured, Michael will be here shortly. Michael is a Grammy-nominated musician. He's a creative mystic and a boundary-pushing artist whose work sits at the crossroads of music, spirituality, and questions of meaning. As the co-founder and primary songwriter of the indie band Gungor, he's known for genre-bending albums that weave folk, rock, electronic, and world music into lyrical explorations of the divinity of the human experience. And as readers of my trilogy know, and guests of the show, I've got this deep thread of music, the lyrics, how music clothes the words with meaning and provides communication that is, even with the however many million words that we have at our capacity as human beings, music provides something that is just otherwise not there. After beginning his career writing worship music out of a traditional Christian background, his evolving spiritual journey led him into wider, more experimental territory, spanning ambient instrumental projects like On Earth, the experimental Wee Woo. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. He'll let me know when we have him join. And collaborations for film, television, and with other artists. He also co-founded the Liturgists podcast and hosts Loving This, creating spaces for honest conversation around faith, science, art, and non-dual spirituality. We're going to see if we have Michael here or not. He was having some challenges with his microphone, and I think we have him ready now. So we'll welcome into the studio.
Hi there.
Hey, Michael, it sounds like you got it all sorted out just in the nick of time.
We have a little bit of a workaround, but we're here. How you doing?
Good. Do you ever have concerts like that where things don't seem to be going together and you got an audience there, or is it?
I've had some great train wrecks through the years. Just legendary train wrecks. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll hear a little bit about them. So, I was just, I don't know if you could hear some of the intro that I was doing, but I don't know if I got the name right, the pronunciation of the...
Wee Woo.
Wee Woo? So
yeah,
tell me about that.
That one's like the most, that's a deep cut, if you will. That one's, I did an embodiment dance record during the pandemic when we were all locked away, and I... it didn't really fit Gungor's. I mean, Gungor's kind of all over the map, but I sometimes refer to my musical genre as ADHD. But Wee Woo, even for that, was a little bit out there. So there's a very small but dedicated listener base to the Wee Woo stuff. It's an interesting little
awesome
niche project I did. Yeah.
We'll get into that a little bit, but first, let's talk about you and your creation story, as we always do here on Created in the Image of God. Tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up, Michael, who your parents were, where were you born, the circumstances, the forces that gave you shape and structure before you took conscious thought.
Wisconsin, middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, called Marshfield. My dad was a pastor of a little charismatic church on the outskirts of town in like a really Lutheran white town. He was kind of the eccentric Puerto Rican tongue talking revival holding pastor on the edge of town. And I was the music guy. Since I was little, I was always playing music in the band and even the two and
How
three
did
year
how
olds in
did your
church.
dad and how did your dad end up in country Wisconsin, and who was your mom, and how did that all work out?
Yeah, my dad was he was born in the Bronx, and his dad left his mom, and in kind of a dramatic few early years, somehow she ended up meeting a Turkish doctor, and then they moved to Wisconsin for him to take a doctor job, and that was where Gungor came from. Actually, it's this Turkish guy that adopted my dad and his siblings, and they moved to nowhere, Wisconsin, and he was kind of like the only brown boy in town, and their family was kind of like the only brown
Well,
family,
don't
and
know if, I
yeah,
don't know if you know that I'm actually in Wisconsin.
really,
I live, yeah, I live south of Madison in a little
okay,
town called Brooklyn in the township of Oregon. So it's the vortex of East Coast meets West. Brooklyn Township of Oregon, Wisconsin.
that's
So
funny.
tell me more where this nowhere, because and my wife went to school with some people from Kenosha, which she called
Uh huh.
Kenowhere until Kyle
Yeah,
whatever appeared on the map.
Neilsville was where my dad was. Neilsville, which is uh, I don't know how many people, 1,000
Never
people,
heard of
two
it. Yeah.
thousand people, three, yeah, yeah. And then Marshfield was like the town that
Okay.
was like a half hour away from there.
Yeah.
Anybody that ever heard of Marshfield is like the clinic was a decent clinic there. That's kind of what anybody knows. But it's still, 18,000 people was the town I grew up in. And then my mom was from St. Louis, and I think they met at like Bible school or something, and moved to
So
Wisconsin.
you were initially, in this church situation, and you were supporting that your dad's ministry and work with music, and you were involved. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up playing music in the church, in the youth group, in the children's church, playing in the band. I learned how to, again, like it was this charismatic kind of a lot of revivals, a lot of long worship sets. So it actually is where I learned how to improvise, how to use my ear, how to respond to a moment musically, and there was a lot of good times in it, and there was a lot of stuff that I needed to outgrow, and some of that was painful. But overall, I'm really grateful for my childhood.
So what was the sort of emerging awareness of those things that you needed to outgrow? How did that emerge for you?
Uh, I had an English teacher I went to the Christian school at my church, and in junior high, he gave us this project that ended up, long story short, he kind of tricked us into, he wanted us to push back against him, even though he was trying to get us, like, on the surface, he was like, agree with me. And it was all about like the end times. And I remember leading this, like, I don't think it's this, it was very much like conspiracy theory. Your Visa card is the 666 mark of the beast. It was all this conspiracy theory stuff. And he had us read this book, and we fought back on him, and he was like, good job, guys. But I had needed my dad to kind of question it first. I was reading it at home, and my dad was like, what is this? This looks like nonsense. And then I went to school and was kind of like the primary fighter against this. But in that, I was also kind of embarrassed that I needed my dad to first say it. And so from then on, I started like really questioning things more. Like, what do I believe and why do I believe it? Whose authority am I basing what on? And so it went through a good, 15 years of really slow, painful, what you might call deconstruction of a lot of my assumptions and beliefs. And that was all happening while I was kind of taking off as a Christian musician and touring the world and, being held in the spotlight. And while at the same time being like, I don't know if I believe any of this stuff.
Wow. So, who were the main religious groups that were supporting you? What was it like on that Christian tour circuit? I don't know if, just as an outsider and not knowing much about the music industry, I assume it's its own kind of machine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting little culture of, it's mostly evangelical, I think, the kind of the Christian music industry. But there's a lot of kind of rules that were sort of just assumed, like I would come to find out you needed to believe in like a literal creation story that like the world was like 6,000 years old. That was orthodox. And if you questioned that, you started being pushed out. So those were some of the things where by the time people were interviewing me and stuff, I started getting in trouble because I was like saying things like, well, no, I read Genesis metaphorically. And they're like, whoa, you'll never believe who doesn't believe the Bible. And so I started kind of getting in trouble for not fitting into some of the lines of the Christian music industry, which does happen to be, like the biggest Christian radio station in the country was playing some of our music. And then they found out some of the things that I didn't believe and sent like a belief statement that they wanted me to sign to play any more of my music, including like there's only male or only female and there's no confusion about it, never mix, never whatever. That was like in their belief statements about their faith, which I was like, whoa, this is a dark world here, the Christian music industry. So there's some beautiful people in it. There are people I still love in it, but overall, as a business, and maybe it's evolved since I've been blackmailed from it, but for a while there was a lot of hypocrisy. Like I remember we would do shows in clubs. I was with a big touring Christian tour, and all the shows were dry. No alcohol was allowed even in these clubs that we were playing. But then all the bands and the tour and all the tour crew and everybody were all drinking every night. And I was like, what is this? What like this hypocrisy that was just so on the nose. So I got in trouble for speaking out about some of that stuff sometimes too.
Wow. Fascinating glimpse into that. Tell me a little bit about the Grammy nomination. Was it during that time? Did that come later?
Yeah, that came. So when Gungor, I was Michael Gungor at first as my artist name. I got signed as a worship leader for Integrity Music, and then I became the Michael Gungor Band, and we were kind of doing like progressive worship music, or like rock band kind of stuff. And then kind of made an artistic decision to put the art a little more forward and not just like congregational worship leader guy, and chopped off Michael Band and just became Gungor. And it was around then that it started getting any kind of momentum. And that was the first couple Gungor records both got nominated for some Grammys.
And was that still in the Christian context?
Yeah, but it was in a context of, that's when I was really quite unsure of what I believed about anything. And I would write about it. I was quite outspoken in my music anyway, about like a lot of it was about doubt, and I don't know what I believe, help me, and it was interesting because people resonated with it, but then when they kind of found out that it wasn't just poetry, it wasn't just like
It was
real
real
doubt. It was actual doubt. They're like, oh,
no,
wait.
don't be authentic. Wow. So, my assessment of you, bad word, but my understanding of who you are is somebody who's still seeking. Is that fair? Or do you feel like you've
No, I wouldn't
arrived?
say that.
Was there a point? I guess what I'm getting at is, was there a point where you then sort of landed after that period of doubt and uncertainty?
I landed in completely comfortable with not knowing anything. And that took a lot of dying. But yeah, it was a series of very painful deaths and deeply embodying that letting go into mystery in an embodied way took a long time and still deepens layer by layer. I mean, I find, I have ways of kind of searching through the system. I'm actually writing a book right now about this kind of framework of one thing that I've used for a long time is to kind of search through all these layers of my being. Is there anything holding on, grasping it? That can be literally, but physically, sometimes like dancing it out, emotionally, pockets of old stories, parts of me that haven't surfaced since I was a little kid and only come out in certain circumstances. And then like, oh, hi, who are you? This like little part of you. But that to me is the story over time is those parts and those like constrictions kind of coming into the light, being seen, being loved. But I haven't been a seeker in the sense that I think most people would say since like probably 2016. That's kind of when the final death's knoll of am I going to figure this out kind of rang.
Yeah. So now I don't think we have a specific video about you. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. It's a book that I felt would be thematically related by a gentleman who has a PhD in the philosophy of religion. It's called The Philosophical War. It's very short. We'll be right back to dive into how and where Michael landed and where he went from there and talk about that book right when we come back from this break.
In a world where the battle of minds goes unnoticed, one man dared to challenge the very structure of consciousness itself. Joseph Ottman proudly presents the first part of his groundbreaking collected work, A Philosophical War. Ottman's mission is to expose humanity's most elusive adversary, the structure of its own consciousness. He argues that the modern human condition is plagued by a thought process that inflicts unnecessary suffering. This thought process, like a stealthy enemy, wages war against our nature. Ottman's quest is both daring and revolutionary, to overthrow and replace the current prevailing conscious structure. He identifies the enemy within and seeks a more coherent and powerful ally. With digestible bursts of epistemological guerrilla strikes, he pierces the lines of everyday thought patterns. This counteroffensive offers a new perspective, one that challenges the way we perceive reality. Ottman asserts that humanity's consciousness has relied too heavily on thought alone. He introduces being with, a relationality that harmonizes humanity with the world around us. But the battle doesn't end there. Ottman reinterprets the early chapters of Genesis. He calls for the removal of contemporary notions of God while offering a profound argument for God's existence. Filled with intrigue, simplistic insights, and mystical yet realistic hope, this book is a potential landmark work. A Philosophical War by Joseph Ottman. Available at Amazon.
So we can come back to a couple of the ideas in there and weave them in with what you're doing. But what is the title of that book that you're working on?
Well, the working title is Within the Shape of Love. We'll see if that ends up being what it is in the end, but that's the working title.
So not to give too much away, but what can you share about the shape of love?
Yeah. So what I noticed in my own journey was the amount of inner problems that I kept seeking outside of myself for solutions for. I think our bodies have these amazing instincts. We have, we have these needs as bodies, for food, for shelter, for sex, for whatever. And to meet those needs, the body needs to scan the environment and look, oh, there's food. Oh, there's a way I can build shelter. And so it works on a body level. But when that starts being applied to our mind, to our emotions, to our spirituality, it just actually never, what we're looking for inwardly is never actually found out there. So, and I think most of us are kind of lost in this world where, like, I feel sad and alone and exiled and whatever else, depressed and separate. And so I look out there for relationships to fix it, or look out there for some sort of approval or some sense of control over the world, or some sense of safety, for my internal world out there. And it never works. And so I think the message of Jesus, of Yeshua, was the kingdom of God is within you. Everything that you're looking for, actually, from this vantage point of the inner life, the who you are, isn't ever going to be found externally. It's all found within. And so it's a real reversal of everything. And so the shape of love it's kind of turning everything upside down. It's like we keep moving in the wrong direction always. Like that's what it's the sin, I would call, is. That's what the sense of exile, of separateness is. And the message of Yeshua is metanoia. It's repentance. It's turning back the other direction. And that's not about feeling guilty for doing bad things or anything like that. It's literally reorienting and turning it all upside down. And I think that's what Jesus' teachings did. I think that's what his embodied life was. It's like everyone thinks to have a good life, you have to grasp onto life. And he was like, no, actually, you have to be willing to die. That's what to be willing to die is where you're free. That's where you live. And it was all like that. You want to be the greatest, you need to be the least. Everything was upside down. So this book is an exploration of everything, the instincts that we often have when we come across something inside that we don't like. Let's say we come across judgmental attitudes. The instinct is to judge the judgmental attitudes and to create a little loop and be like, no, I don't want to be judgmental because I know it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, this is Paul. This is Paul, right? The thing that I met this Christian guy who's on his golf balls. He played golf on his golf balls. He put that quote, "The thing that I hate is that which I do." He had put it on every golf ball because the golf balls never went where he wanted.
Totally. Yeah. And we fight it. And it's like, I've heard Alan Watts talk about trying to calm water by splashing it more, like trying to hold it together. Yeah. It doesn't work. So the actually seeing the judgment, noticing it, and bringing loving awareness to it, as though it was like part of your family, like a young child who was throwing a temper tantrum or something, like, oh, hello, what do you need? Who are you? What's going on here? It's a different approach to how we engage suffering, how we engage shadow work, how we engage anything, rather than trying to force ourselves to be who we think we should be. It's more about embracing what is now by seeing it and loving it. And that's the upside down, because our egos go like, well, you can't embrace what is, otherwise we're going to be rotten human beings. We think that by trying to fight who we are, that's what will make us better, but it's not how it works. So the shape of love is actually just everything is upside down. See what is and love what is and let it move and grow and alchemize.
Well, wow, I'm loving this. I've had a couple of thoughts. I'm going to have to actually jot down notes here because there are several things I want to cover. The first one is, it's interesting that you mentioned that, your own sort of first little existential crisis came on this literal interpretation of Genesis and the earth being 6,000 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And that, God forbid you were now reading Genesis metaphorically, right? But it's interesting because in that little video we had about Joe Atman, he goes into the book of Genesis. We'll get to that in a second. But what you were saying was fascinating. I had this thought that I've never had before. Probably many others have had it, but that when in that story, Eve reaches for the apple because it was desired to make one wise. Well, the name of the show is Created in the Image of God. And obviously, God wanted us. Paul, the apostle, gets to this later when he says, strong meat belongs to those who by reason of use have exercised their senses to discern good and evil. So we have that power within. That's a God-given ability to chart our course and discern good and evil. But Eve, and this is the point, Eve reached for something outside herself. She's like, oh, that sounds good. I want that. But rather than realizing that, yes, and I've created you to have that and to be that and to do that, she reached for something outside herself in that story. When you were talking,
Interesting. Yeah, I like the reaching outside to try to meet the internal need.
And then later, your story about
the
young boy, how did God react? He asked this great question. This is, to me, one of the greatest questions that God ever asked anybody. Who told you you were naked? Right? It's not like he's asking, who let the cat out of the bag that I created you naked? It's a gentle but deeply probing question. Who told you you were naked?
Yeah. To even frame something as naked, you have to, like this. It's funny. It's just a body. We just call a body by itself, oh no, it's naked. It's funny we even have a word for it in a way. It's like, but it does depend on others' view to set up an entire world. You're kind of basing your fundamental reality on perception, being like,
and you're reacting to that. You are now interpreting yourself differently because of how you perceive somebody else is interpreting you.
Yeah.
So another thing in that book, what Adler goes into, this was sort of revelatory to me too, is that he talks about the not engaging with reality, right? When the emergence of consciousness, with that story about the forbidden fruit and the emergence of consciousness, the ability to have language. With language comes the ability to form concepts, right? So we create a concept in our head, and that concept is not the thing itself. It's not actually reality itself, right? So, for example, we create a concept in our head about who God is, but that's not God. That's our concept. It's actually more like a false idol, which we're forbidden to have, right? Don't form a concept of me in your head and think that's who I am, is one way to interpret that, right? And living in the moment and engaging with reality itself is different. How do you react to that? Is that similar to some of the things you're exploring?
So in this framework that I'm writing about, one of the layers is noticing 4 different ingredients of the present moment. And there's perception, which is our senses. There's sensation, which is our sort of inner body's world. Like noticing your muscles, your breath. Do you have to pee? All that, like the inner world of sensation. There's emotion, and there's thought. And that's it. Like that, those are the ingredients of this moment. Anything that you're experiencing right now is some blend of those 4 kind of primary ingredients.
Perception, sensation, thought. What was the third one again?
Emotion.
So yeah, fascinating. Go ahead.
And so in that, the stories that we experience and the stories we create about God, the idols, if you will, these concepts, if you notice that they're concepts, they don't have to be idols in the sense of an idolatry, I don't think, because it still can be, you can engage with the livingness of thought, of words, even of constructs in a way that isn't idolatrous. I don't think it's
Right.
finding
No,
God. It's
absolutely.
not
This is
finding God in a specific place that's idolatry. It's mistaking that specific for the entirety of God. So it's like you can actually encounter the living spirit even in a thought if you notice that it's a thought. But if you lose it, if you lose track and now you've forgotten that this is a golden calf and you think this is the entire deity, now it's an idol. So if you think your idea of God is the equivalent of what God is, that's the idolatry. But you can use images, thoughts, constructs as sort of diving boards into God, into mystery, in beautiful ways. I think that's the
well,
best what religion can be.
no, exactly. So, and this is the discussion I have with Joe as we're working through the second book in that series. Is we need those concepts. Those concepts are a gift. Language is a gift. In the beginning
Mhm.
was the word, right? The word gives us the ability to form those concepts. Um, but then, of course, to your point, that concept isn't the reality, but it's a useful help. This is why, for example, I have a problem now. I'll get banned. I have a problem with the Trinity, right? The
Mm.
Trinity being a very specific formulation that becomes a litmus test that you have to confess your belief in the Trinity. And what I like to say is, well, if the Trinity is the way you describe, then the Father is not the Father because Mary was with child of the Holy Spirit. Right? So it breaks down. This analogy breaks down, and it's problematic if somebody tells me that I have to view it exactly like that.
Yeah, I'd put the problem with the belief more than even the specifics of belief, because I think you can hold anything in a certain way. Again, that like, is this useful for love, for surrender, for being more present in this moment? If so, then it's good religion. If it's held on to as an identity forming abstraction that separates a group of us from a group of them, to me it's nonsense. It's just a tool for the ego or the empire, which is just the ego writ large. That's it. Like, so the whole we believe, we're starting on the wrong foot. I think, like, other than, I wish we had better words for, I mean, I know not everybody uses belief in that really restrictive way that I'm using it right now, but when we're using an idea to go, do you mentally where we assent to this idea that I'm telling you? And if so, you're part of us. And if not, you're in the out. That is the work of the Antichrist to me, not the Christ.
Well, yeah, because it does divide. In fact, I'm a
Yeah.
former minister. I resigned in 1995 in the midst of a schism of this small denomination or sect split right down the middle. And one of the issues was the nature of God. I was at the ministerial conference in Colmar where this abstract definition of who and what God was being forced on everybody. And it was one of the things that all ended up splitting us down the middle. And
Yeah.
I was a peacemaker and I was successful in the context, and both sides wanted me to join them, but I'm like, we've just shown that we're not what we think we are.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus said, you'll know them by their love, not by their beliefs.
Right.
Like the fruit of,
Yeah, John
if you're,
13:35. By this shall all men know that you
that
are
you're
my
my
disciple,
disciples.
that you have love one for another.
That's it.
And that,
Not that
and
you
if
have the right
all
views
men,
of the Trinity.
yeah, if all men can see this, that means independent, outside, third-party observers who don't care who you define as your brother, right? You must love indiscriminately.
Yeah. And that can include disagreement, when you can have your ideas of what you think are the best constructs and argue about it. I think it's fine to have, like, I find beautiful aspects of the
Important.
Trinity and maybe even important, but I also don't care at all if you share them, because I don't know what they mean to your ears or to your heart. I know what they mean to my ears and to my heart. But that level, can we have enough humility to know that anything we're talking about is just a thought? And then it's like, is this thought useful to help love each other? That's it.
I want to get back to something else that you triggered in my thinking. Are you familiar with a gentleman named Bruce Lipton who wrote this? He wrote The Biology of Belief.
Okay.
Interesting.
I've heard his name, I feel like, but I don't remember.
He did his research actually at the University of Madison, with another Wisconsin connection, right? But here's the premise of some of his research. There's a whole lot there, but I'm going to go into this one point that, again, I was thinking about as you were unpacking the shape of love and these four things. So at the single cell level, there's DNA and RNA, and everybody has traditionally thought of DNA as determinate, right? Well, what he showed was that RNA actually can interact with the external world outside the cell wall. So again, referring back to what you were describing earlier, the single cell discerns its environment, discerns if it's healthy or dangerous, discerns if there's food. And that's the function of the RNA, is to penetrate that semi-permeable cell wall, which the cell needs the cell wall to survive, but it also needs to interpret its environment. And so RNA actually, and this is what his research proved, the RNA informs the DNA what to do. So the RNA actually shapes what the DNA does, and the DNA functions just like a photocopier. But it does what the RNA is instructing it to do. This was fascinating. He then extrapolates a lot, but you were talking about sensing the outside world and our perception. So I just thought I'd throw that into the mix and see how you react.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about the power of the human mind and the human imagination is we can create these entire worlds in our minds that are really useful for building a society and building relationships and structures and businesses and art and all the things that humans create. We can imagine a world where there's a building where there isn't one right now. And that helps us build a building. But there's this funny thing that happens when our imagination, our minds get wired into our nervous systems in a way that the instruction, the RNA, if you will, of like, okay, fire all the defensive hormones, put all the cortisol in the system that was really useful when we were fleeing from tigers. But now that all gets fired when I see a bad comment on my Instagram post, because now I'm living in a world where I am an abstraction in my mind, and that abstraction is threatened by someone else's perception, because I'm building my idea of what I am based partially, at least, on people's perception of me. So now my whole evolutionary wiring of like all my defenses and the freeze and the fawn and all that are activated based on abstractions, which isn't necessarily useful as much as as it was for the body. And so I think some of the spiritual work is kind of untying some of the things that have gotten melded together with what is the actual reality of this moment that we're living in versus this abstract world that I'm living in my mind, of the future and the past, and this sense of who I am compared to who you are, and how what you think of me determines who I think I am. All that abstract stuff, if that doesn't get kind of untangled and unbundled from my nervous system a little bit and my sense of who I am, the suffering that we live in and the constant anxiety and the constant malaise, I think, is what we see in our society. Most people are just never okay. We're just never okay because there's constant threat of my ego. My ego's constantly under threat, and the world becomes constantly just a resource or a threat, as opposed to when I'm actually present to what's happening and I notice this breath and this thought as a thought and this emotion as an emotion. I'm not so lost in a whirlwind of mind activity and believing that I'm in some other world where I'm actually under threat, but I can actually be here and present to life in a way that is abundantly, you might say, in the words of Yeshua.
Amazing. So an image that came to mind is so some of my audience knows I've talked about this a little bit. I was diagnosed at 28 with a chronic crippling autoimmune disease. I was told I'd be in a wheelchair at age 40. I was told there was no cure. And this is one of the reasons I dove into some of the research that I did, because they wanted to just give me cortisone. And I'm like, is that going to help? And no, it could ease some of the symptoms. I'm like, but I knew it would actually make me worse, right? To go on this cortisone regimen. This was, by the way, in Germany. Doctors in multiple countries confirmed it. I went on temporary disability. I was offered permanent disability. But I came through that, and it's in complete remission. But there was a lot of soul searching and work, and it gets to this concept of this core defensiveness, right? And if the abstraction of who I am is out there under existential threat because of somebody else, well, this is what I was doing to myself, though. I was literally, I was chewing up all the soft tissue in my body, and it was particularly affecting my spine and my hips. It's called ankylosing spondylitis, if anyone's heard of it. I had a severe case. You had one-sided iritis, which means your immune system was attacking the eye, right? And that's how I ended up in a clinic and was diagnosed. They had to inject my eye with cortisone because the infection was so severe. There was no fluid transmission in and outside of the eye, and the pressure was building on the optic nerve, right? And so they injected me with cortisone in the eye. They saved the eye, and then they diagnosed, this is what you have. Have a nice day, right? So that's also getting into the biology of belief, and why I studied into that. But the point I'm making here is this there were many reasons for it, childhood, whatnot. But my ego and the defensiveness, right? And yeah, feeling under threat, constantly at war
with yourself,
with myself, and with the outside world as well.
But that's, so I love that you shared that story, and I'm sorry for the pain that you went through. I kind of experienced
a tremendous blessing, right? In the end.
Yeah. Well, I can relate from the opposite side. I had kind of an opposite body thing happen this last year, where I had Bell's palsy. So I lost my face. My body wasn't attacking my body. It kind of lost touch with it. It just forgot that it existed. So half my face went paralyzed. And it was such a wild thing to just lose part of your body, as the, it couldn't control it. And one of the big realizations and gifts that I had through that experience was this realization that that is the source of autoimmune stuff. When the body doesn't know what it is, whether it's an autoimmune attacking itself or it loses touch with it, that's a lot of what we call disease. Right. We lose the ease of the body, and how much that happens in the mind and spiritually. I think what we see at large in our society is because we've lost sense of who we are, the one life, the one humanity, the one family. We're bombing each other. Why? Because we've forgotten that's us. We've this identity has gotten misplaced from an us to this abstract me who's over and against you, and it's completely made up, and it's very harmful. And so just like medicine sometimes with our bodies is like reminding the body. When I'd have any nerve that came back online, I just spent most of the time I had it in bed, just touching small spaces in my face and feeling. And when anything would come back, I would cry. It was this homecoming. It was like this prodigal son moment, or the shepherd finding the sheep again. It was like, oh, welcome home. You're back. And I think, to me, that's what spirituality is about. But it's never about just me. It's about us. And when we remember who we are, when I remember who I am, bombing my neighbor is the most ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as me sitting here and trying to gouge out my own eyes. It's absurd.
Well, that's a great segue to our next commercial break. And we'll talk a little bit about what this project is as well, while we talk about what's next for you, the work on the book, if you have any sense of when it's coming out. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Michael Gungor on Created in the Image of God.
In a world where religions often talk past each other, what if we just sat down and listened? Facets of One is a simple devotional, bringing together scripture from the world's faiths, centered on one truth. God is one. From the Bible to the Quran, from Krishna to Christ, each voice speaks in turn, without argument, without division. You don't have to agree on everything. Just be willing to pray, to listen, and to come together. If you're longing for something deeper than noise and division, this is a different kind of conversation. Facets of One. Many voices, one God. Will you start a circle?
So again, this one seemed fitting to the conversation with you, and seems even more fitting after what you were just talking about. So this idea that we have a global species-wide autoimmune condition right now.
Yeah.
And what's the solution to that? I happen to have a copy of this book right here. Part of the inspiration for this came from the Shema, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one. And I asked, is that unique? And of course, in a way it is, right? There's one Bible, there's one Israel. But if you look into the other faith traditions, it's not as unique as you would think. And I want to just read one key passage, because when I was sharing this with one of the upcoming guests on the show, he said, there are a number of religions that don't even believe in God. And he mentioned the Tao, as one, because I mentioned we have quotes from the Tao in here. And I read this to him, and he was kind of speechless after that, right? So this is from the first section, which talks about there is one God. And this is the quote we chose from the Tao. It's perhaps a familiar one to some. Let me just quickly find it here. There was something undifferentiated and yet complete, which existed before heaven and earth. I do not know its name. I term it the way. And I love that it says, I don't know its name.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is, again, getting back to this idea of the concepts and the words. In the beginning was the word, but I don't know what it was called. I call it the way. And then Jesus later says, I am the way.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you see this essential oneness that we have. And this book is a project of starting circles of people coming together and just reading these things. And because one of the great onenesses that has failed to materialize, even as we as a species move forward, recognizing that we're one, there are lots of movements, but in religion, there's still all this differentiation. And it's existential, right? You must believe this to be saved. What is required for salvation, right, is a question that's often discussed in theological circles.
Yeah, one of the other things that I'm exploring in this book, The Shape of Love, is there's something that happens. Those of you who have had mystical experience, there's this thing that a lot of people report and that all the mystics have written about. I think it's what Jesus was talking about. I think it's what Buddha was talking about. I think it's what the Tao Te Ching was about, is this perspective or this vantage point that can be seen, that can be tasted, that can be experienced, if you will, that is unitive. It's just union. Everything is one. God is one. All there is the unnameable Tao, Christ, all in all. What all people have named it different things. I love at the beginning of the Tao Te Ching that it says it can't be named. The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. I think that's gorgeous. The word that can be named it's not something you can contain, because then who are you outside of it that you think you can contain it? It's infinite. Everything is contained within it. But while that can happen and does happen, and then while I think there's a way of saying that that's all there is, there's also this experience of the most human beings where we feel separate and we feel isolated, and like, this is me. This one little experience that's happening right here is me. And to say that that one little experience is the Tao is in a way misleading. There's a shape to reality that while it's one, there's enough, reality, for instance, is bent towards being. It's not static. It's not uniform. There's enough bend of the one to actually be something. So the universe is tilted in a way. Reality is tilted towards being. I would say towards love. That's what I would call love, is yes. So in that there's a shape that emerges, that it's not actually as true to say that it's this way, if you will. It is actually that the wave, in a way, it's the ocean, but it's also smaller than the ocean, right? So some of what we do with religions and how we make meaning of it, one of the things I like about Christianity more and more over time, and one of the reasons I'm now wearing this Tao cross, is I think Christianity does a good job at revealing that shape in different ways, through the teachings of Christ, for instance, through the death and resurrection story, that archetype of like, that when we die into the greater of whatever I feel like I am, that surrender, that move is more accurate than what can happen when we try to switch it and be like, I am God, what I feel like I am is God. There's a way that that's true, I think, but it's not, it's only from the vantage point of God. So
I hear you. So the reason I have this sun and moon behind me is a constant reminder of the verses in Genesis where it says, God set the greater and lesser lights in heaven to rule the day and rule the night. And the reason I went into this, my second book, as a result of a very painful divorce experience, both in my youth, my kidnapping, I was kidnapped by my father in domestic kidnapping. My mother had full custody. He came and told the babysitter he was taking me and my two sisters to the mall. He just didn't tell her the mall was in Sweden. This eventually went to the Supreme Court of Sweden, by the way. That's an aside, really, but this demon that haunted me was, I will never get divorced like my dad did. Well, guess what, right? My first wife divorced me. I'm very happily married with 2 kids today, but this was gut-wrenchingly painful, existential. It was also in the time when I was sick with this autoimmune disease. It was really awful, right? But I went back and I'm like, why is my marriage failing? I'm trying to live, according to the biblical principles and whatnot. I went back to the book of Genesis, and there's this curse of Eden, right? Where God tells Eve, you will have pain in childbirth. And he tells he tells Eve, your desire will be to your husband and he will rule over you. This is where this word rule comes in, right? So I'm like, where does that come from? And is it real? Because it's actually a curse, right? It's a curse in the sense that this is how this plays out now. Now that you're looking outside yourself, your desire is turning away from what? The rulership of the light, the greater and lesser light in broad daylight, and even in the darkest night, there's light. That light rules us. When we submit to the light, we retain our sovereignty. Naming all the animals was a degree of sovereignty. We have sovereignty on this planet, right up to the greater and lesser lights in heaven. Everything in this Garden of Eden floating through space, this blue-green jewel, was created for us. And we have sovereignty on it. We're not subject to any man or woman when we submit to the light. But if we deviate from that, if we fail to submit to the light, even by 1 degree, heading to the moon, you'll miss it by 100 million miles. You'll sail off into outer darkness. You will become enslaved to somebody or something. what am I saying here? I'm agreeing with you on the power of the Christian message, the power of what Jesus did to provide that light, to provide that clarity, and we must submit to it.
Well, it's, to me, it's like an invitation to see it. Not so much something that's being imposed over and against us, but I think he would constantly say, upset what people were thinking that he meant. And he's, even when they try to elevate him, he'd be like, "You're going to do greater things than me." Right. And I think a big part of the failing of Christendom is to believe what he said in that. Like, we've made him an idol. Like, okay, he was the God guy. And if we just obey his teachings, then someday maybe we'll get to be with him. I don't think that has anything to do with what he was saying. I think it was about right now. Look at the birds, look at the flowers, feel life. You are one already with your Father, just as I am. But look, can you see it? And I think it tells stories to try to let people see it. And he's like, and he would say, most of you don't have any idea what I'm talking about. But when
even after he explained it, right? Even after he explained it 3 times. Right?
Yeah, because we see everything through this fundamental identity lens. Right. And this is where I think Christianity can learn from some of the more other mystical and Eastern traditions and stuff, is there's so much in Christianity that has value, and that kind of humility of approaching that which seems bigger than me. But then having the faith and the imagination that it's possible to actually get there, or to actually find freedom. I don't find that imagination in hardly any Christian circles, like to actually be completely free and at union with God. It is possible. Christ was speaking from that. And I think it was an invitation into it, but then it's like we get 1 step removed, 2 step removed, 2,000 steps removed. And now we're just like worshiping the golden calf of the golden calf of the golden calf. And, but to actually trust that maybe the union that Jesus embodied is possible to feel. And from there, that's where it's all in all. There's only God from that vantage point. There is nothing but Christ. There's nothing but the all. There's nothing but the Tao. Anything that you think of as separate becomes brought back into that light, if you will. And then there's nothing ruling anything. It's just the light itself. You are the light of the world. We call him the light, and he said, you are the light. He was trying to remind us, look, can you open your eyes? Can you remember who you are? Take this, eat this. You are my body. Remember me, not who's me. Before Abraham was, I am. Not me, this guy living 2,000 years ago in the desert making carpet. Me, the I am, the word, the Tao, the mystery. Can you remember? Take if you need a little bread, a little wine, whatever you need. Look at the birds. Think of this story about a farmer. Whatever you need to remember who you are. I think that was the gospel. He is the gospel. The way is the gospel. And it's what you are when you stop trying to be something else.
Wow. Very well said. Thank you so much. So in terms of leaning into being, do you have a sense of when this book will be finished, when we can get a hold of it?
Some of it depends on, I'm in talks with some publishers right now. And if we go the publishing route or the self-publishing route, I'm not positive yet. If we go self-publishing, it will be out a lot faster, I think. But I have a full manuscript done. But
well, we should talk. I actually have quite a bit of experience there. Might be able to give you a couple of tips, something to think about. Will definitely keep us posted on that. So how else can people engage with you right now? Is there a website URL? Are there, music CDs? Obviously the band Gungor for producing music.
One of the big things I would invite people to check out right now is called Mystic Hymnal. And we're on tour right now, actually. And it's a group singing project. But so I grew up as a worship leader, like I said at the beginning. And what I found is that the power of group singing is so profound. Some of my earliest mystical experiences were in worship. But then, like we were saying, this idea of God kind of being an other in exile and all the shame and I am naked and all that stuff, all the Garden of Eden stuff kind of comes in sometimes to the religious spaces. And a lot of us get burned by worship spaces. But then we end up losing the power, the potential power of some of those rituals. And so there's been this project that me and a group of other songwriters have been writing songs for people that are 3 rules, really easily singable by groups, musically alive still, and unitive, rather than based in like divisive doctrines and dogmas and us versus them. And so we've been going around for we're pretty much all month of May, we're different places. And it's been amazing. You have
coming to Wisconsin?
We might in the fall. We had some Minnesota. I'm not sure if Wisconsin, but we're still booking dates. So if anybody wants to host one of these, please get a hold of us as well. But you can go to my website, Michael Gungor, and you can see all my projects, Mystic Hymnal and Gungor and my podcasts and stuff.
Is that simply one word, michaelgungor.com?
Yep.
Or .org or .com?
.com, yeah, michaelgungor.com. Or follow me on Instagram or whatever, But that, right. Yeah, that would be a fun thing to come. It's been so fun. We're just in the Bay Area, and I remember one of my favorite scenes was playing out. There was like a bunch of old Lutheran ladies dancing with a bunch of hippies in the back of this church, and I was like, I'm living right now. This is so fun. So bridging worlds, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, I mean, I could go on for another hour, but we're kind of out of time, sadly. Slow start, but really got moving there, and a lot of deep, rich thought and conversation. What would you like to leave the audience with? We didn't even have time to get into some of the audience comments. There weren't a ton tonight. I think a lot of people were just really listening. But let me find one here. Grant Speller, you just said in the beginning was the Word. Didn't Jesus call himself the Word? That was, I don't know if you have any comment about that.
Well, that's like the book of John. Yeah. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And I think that's what he was referring to when he said, before Abraham was, I am. It's the Tao. It's the unnamed mystery. And it's what remains when we're not identified. So those abstractions that we were talking about earlier about who I am, I have all these stories. The ego is this set of stories. And I think there's not just one ego. I actually think there's lots of different little versions of me's that pop up in different circumstances. And I love internal family systems, deals with psychology in a different way than a lot of other systems. It's not just one me in here. If I say, how are you feeling? If you're honest, you might be feeling a bunch of different ways right now. If you really pay attention, I'm a little sad, I'm a little happy, I'm a little grumpy, I'm a little hungry. Our bodies work. They have all these different systems, the circulatory, the pulmonary, the digestive. And so our minds are multifaceted as well, and our psychology. And so anything that feels like a me, when you look into it, turns out to just be this kind of story that's a bundle of those 4 ingredients in some way, of our perspectives and our emotions and our sensations and our thoughts. And when we stop trying to be a me in a moment, what you notice, there's nothing that can be named in any meaningful way in a moment of full presence. If you're ever like, this can happen in just moments where you're just really present to a piece of music or making love or a piece like a sunset, something, anything that you're just like totally in it. There's no those hard walls of the me that's separate from the food or separate from the sunset. They kind of start dissolving. It's just the thing. It's just life. It's just the moment that really you don't even have time to name it if you're fully present to it. There's no distance when you're fully present in life. You have to kind of step back to try to understand it or to try to name it or try to get it or own it or resource it. But if you're not stepping back from it, you are it. And so that's the invitation, I think, of Yeshua It's everything I'm inviting in all my work, all my music, all my podcasts. It's like this moment. Could you see what's going on? Can you notice the feelings in your body? Can you notice the emotions? Can you notice the thoughts? And can you see how beautiful it is? When you stop trying to bundle it into a resource or a threat for a me to thrive on or be threatened by, and instead it just becomes the miracle of life living itself, life becomes exceptionally gorgeous. Every moment of it is miraculous. And so my invitation is an echo of Yeshua's invitation of look at what's going on. Isn't it amazing?
Well, you've just given the tagline at the end of my show just 100 times better than I could. And that is, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. You've really unpacked that for us. We are at the end. You've given some really good concluding thoughts here, but I want to offer, what else do you want to share? Or is that a summation that you've just provided?
I would say just blessing the ordinary of our lives. I know one of the favorite moments of the Mystic Hymnal Nights have been this little song that we've been singing that says, "Holy, holy, holy, everything is shimmering with glory." Because I grew up with spirituality, holiness. These were all things that were taught to me as like other than life. It was like we can escape from this carnal flesh either after we die or maybe in a really spiritual moment. If I get spiritual enough and surrender enough, pray hard enough, whatever it is, I can get to some other thing. And sometimes mystical experiences, as beautiful as they can be, the danger of them and the trap of them is they can become their own idols. And like, I remember what it was like when I was feeling spiritual. I remember what it was like when I was feeling union. And then we create this abstract idea of what it's like. And this isn't like that. So something must be wrong here. And to just bless the ordinariness of our suffering and our egos and our constrictions and our resistance and go, this is part of it too. Strangely, that upside downness of like, even this can be part of it. Even this sense of dread, this sense of tightness, this sense of numbness. And ironically, what happens is when we notice, okay, could this be the gift of life as well? Is those things begin to alchemize and grow and move and become full. But it never happens by trying to everybody's trying to experience bliss. Everybody's trying to get rid of their suffering. The radical move of Jesus is to embrace the suffering. That's what this is, to let the moment that is experienced right now, even of a me, of an exiled me, even as I'm reaching out to grab the fruit and try to find something beyond myself, to notice, wow, this too, like this is life too, this is spirit too. And then in that, the moment of recognizing that is the metanoia, is the turning back within. And then even the ordinary begins to shimmer with glory. So my parting thought might be just bless the ordinary, bless the common, bless the mundane, bless the pain, bless the suffering, bless the resistance. And so be it.
Well, now I can't let you go because I have a question that you just that I've got to ask. It's one of the most challenging statements in my view, and it's one that theologians have debated. And it's the statement on the cross, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? So what's your thought on it in the context of what you just said, as Jesus is expressing that in that moment? Because it resonated with me. I felt like I understand that comment or that statement of Jesus a little bit better based on the way you were just providing some closure there for the show.
It's a good question. I don't necessarily have a landed on position of whether that's something that was inserted or if, but let's just say or that it was misunderstood. I've heard people talk about like that's not the right exact translation. I don't know.
Exactly.
I'm not a
Yeah.
scholar, but let's say he did say it, just for the sake of the conversation.
Yep.
Is it possible for God to experience exile from God's self? Yeah, that's what almost all of us are experiencing almost all of the time. So it's putting words to the experience of how can God feel exiled by God? That's what our egos are. That's what it is, like life going like, oh no, where's life? How come I'm not as alive as I want to be? And so, but the embrace, I still think in the context of the story of him being willing to go even there. I love that even in the story, he goes to hell after that. It's not like he dies and then goes like, finally, I get to be back in paradise with my father. He's like, okay, where can I even go lower than this? Like, where is it worse than this, than on the cross? And I think that movement, that's the within movement. That's the opposite movement. All of us are trying to transcend most of the time. We're trying to escape this suffering. We want to get out of here and go up to heaven. That's funny enough, like in the image of the God is up there and Satan is down there. Satan's always the one trying to go up. It's the ego. It's the sin. It's like even that move of trying to get to the apple. It wants to get more. It's trying to get out of this physical and transcend up to heaven. And the contrary motion is God's motion, which is the Christ motion, which is how far down can I go into hell? Which is, it just like the ego hates that, right? It's like the scariest thing in the world. But for him to go to the place willingly of feeling forsaken, if let's assume that's, to me, there's still such a beautiful illustration of what Christ's energy is and how that comes into a normal moment is, oh, I'm feeling sad, rather than trying to bypass that, rather than trying to repress it or get away from it and distract myself. Can I go into it and feel sad? We don't always have the luxury of that in social situations, but if that's our general, like, oh, that's how sadness will transmute into something more beautiful. If you actually allow yourself to grieve, if you actually allow space to feel what you're feeling, that's how you heal. That's how you move through something. But when you keep pushing it away, it's always just going to be there lurking. And so I think that Christ energy is like being with, going into, and that's always, even into the unpleasant, even into what looks like hell. Like the Christ energy is yes, okay, here too. I'll even go here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We are over time. Got to run. In respect for the audience, it's sometimes an endurance, but I would love to keep going. I have one more thing to do, which is to air the sneak peek of next week's show, or next week's two shows. But Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you, to be here in the moment, to explore these topics, the depth of your own experience, and what you've gleaned from that, sharing it. It's just I've learned a lot. I will be also writing about this, what I learned from it, on my Substack, so that'll come out in the next few days, and we'll send you a copy of it so you can take a look at it. And I would love to extend an invitation to have you back at some point in the future as you make progress on that book.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wade. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
and thanks, whoever's been watching here. It's good to be here.
Glad we got the tech worked out as well. So stay tuned for the sneak peek, and we'll see you all next week on Created in the Image of God.
Next week on Created in the Image of God. Sunday, May 17th at 7 a.m. Central Time, host Wade Franson interviews Stephen Ferrara, spiritual author, teacher, and former CEO. After losing his son and later his wife, he shares a path from grief to peace and what it means to find meaning beyond loss. A conversation shaped by loss, reflection, and healing. And then on Tuesday, May 19th at 8 p.m. Central Time, host Wade Franson interviews Gregory Coles, writer, speaker, and language scholar. He explores the intersection of faith, sexuality, and belonging, and how the words we use shape the stories we tell about who we are. From questions of identity and language to the deeper search for honesty, meaning, and connection. Join us live this week, Tuesday and Sunday, created in the image of God.